time travel is a very difficult thing to wrap your head around. There are multiple ways time travel can theoretically work, all of which come with their own set of pros and cons. And I'm going to be discussing all of that today, so without any further ado, let's dive straight in. Let's start off by talking about the different ways that time travel can occur. One way that gets rid of basically all paradoxes, but also most of what makes time travel cool, is the idea of splitting timelines. If you go back and change something, then it creates a new separate future while the original future continues on without you. This isn't very fun for a story in my opinion, since it means if you go back in time and fix a problem, you didn't actually fix it since it still exists. You're just making another timeline where it doesn't. A much more interesting way is the idea that there is only one timeline that cannot be changed. So if you go back in time, you either A, can't affect anything, or B, if you do, then the effect already happened. Like in an episode of Quantum Leap where Sam, the main character, goes back in time to prevent JFK's assassination, but ends up preventing his wife's assassination instead. But how? She wasn't assassinated, you may claim, but yeah, that's kind of the point. She wasn't assassinated because he went back in time. His time travel had already occurred. It was destined to occur since his rescue had already happened long before he ever went back in time. Now this does contradict basically every other episode of the show, since in those he's actively changing history while here he's just fulfilling it. This idea of time travel is set in stone and can also open the gateway for bootstrap paradoxes, where things in time can only happen because they've already happened. For example, you can see this in an episode of My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. So I've heard. In this episode, the main character, Twilight, sees herself from the future with certain differences like an eye patch. She then tries all she can to prevent that future from happening, but everything she does is exactly what leads to that future in the first place. Her final idea to prevent it all is to travel back in time and tell herself not to worry. This, however, is exactly what set it into motion to start with. Her actions lead to her own actions. It's obviously a paradox. These paradoxes, I would say, aren't a bad thing. Paradoxes like this make time travel movies more interesting since things earlier in the story can be explained with events later on. However, there is another version of the bootstrap paradox, and that can be explained with a situation surrounding Beethoven's music, where someone who loves Beethoven's music goes back in time to meet him and discovers that he doesn't exist and neither does his music. And being saddened by a world without Beethoven's music, he publishes the music for himself. So the question is, who made the music? Beethoven didn't make it since he doesn't exist. The time traveler didn't make it since he just heard it before. This creates a paradox where something exists without a true beginning or end. However, this makes even less sense if it's a physical object, like for instance in Milo Murphy's Law, where a time traveler, Cavendish, throws a rock at himself just to pick it up, go back in time, and throw it at himself. The same rock has no start or end. It's going through the exact same situation continuously. It's illogical. However, those paradoxes only occur in a timeline that can't be changed. However, the most common form of time travel is a timeline that can be changed but still remains one timeline. This can be seen in another episode of Quantum Leap, where Sam is time traveling to help people, where his friend Al is at present day at risk of losing funding for the time travel. However, right before they lose funding, Sam tells Diane, a woman from the past, a fact about the law, which, due to the butterfly effect, leads to her becoming the judge and thus becomes the person Al is talking to.
Your $2.4 billion funding request for Project Quantum Leap
shall be approved for 1 more year.
The judge changes while Al is talking to them because Sam changed the past. That's really cool. It also makes no sense. Okay, it's time to talk about some problems with time travel, starting with Quantum Leap. This episode has a huge problem that this show has quite a lot. In fact, it even shows up in the first episode. The problem is that it treats the future and the past like they're happening simultaneously. In the first episode, Sam has to fly a plane, something that he doesn't know how to do. Coincidentally, Al does. So Sam needs Al to come back as a hologram and show him how to fly the plane. However, Sam ends up on the plane starting to fly before Al shows up. Al is late. Al is late!
I was at the Laker game. It went into overtime.
A ball game? I nearly died because you were at a ball game?
How can you be late when you're time traveling? Like seriously, how? This doesn't make any sense. The show acts like Sam's timeline and Al's timeline coexist, and this time moves through them at the exact same rate. This would explain how Al can be late and how Sam can change things in real time. However, not only does this not make sense with the idea of time travel, it also makes no sense in the world of Quantum Leap. In the last episode, spoilers if you haven't seen it, I guess, Al is struggling to find where Sam went to, and is scanning all of time. But if he's scanning all of time, that means he could go back to any one of those times. And thus, it's not just linked to the time that Sam is. Meaning, how are the timelines linked, but also not linked? It makes no sense whatsoever. Most time travel movies have major problems like this. Even probably the most famous time travel movie ever, Back to the Future, has the same problem. Like, how does Marty fade away? It's not like he can exist but not his hand. Either he does or doesn't exist. It's not possible that he might exist. That's not how that works. Also, since at the end of the movie he does exist, that means in the timeline, he exists. So if he exists at the end of the timeline, why would he he start to fade? The probability of him existing doesn't matter because we know that he does exist, meaning the probability is 100% in this timeline. So he shouldn't be fading. I've spent way too much time thinking about these movies. Back to the Future, for the most part, goes with the one changing timeline idea of time travel, which is how he's able to change the future, like getting them all renamed. However, the writers seem like they wanted to switch to other types of time travel all willy-nilly, just whenever they felt like it. Like, why does this picture exist? If he's fading since he's ceasing to exist, why wouldn't the photo disappear? You can't tell me if Marty didn't exist, the photo of a tree would still be taken. It obviously wouldn't. So why didn't it disappear? Also, why would Marty and his siblings disappear at different times? Wouldn't they all disappear at the exact same time, since why would one of them be born but not another? There are so many flaws. But even with these flaws, it's still a good movie. Obviously, time travel is always going to be flawed in a movie setting, because the best way to make a time travel movie is to add flaws. Because like I said earlier, I like the bootstrap paradox. It makes movies more interesting even though it is a flaw. So these movies are still good even though they have flaws. In fact, one of my favorite time travel movies has possibly one of the biggest annoyances when it comes to time travel. The movie is called Deja Vu. Spoilers for pretty much the whole movie, by the way. So if you want to go watch it, go watch it. Just go. I don't want to. It's a good movie. Go watch it. So here's how the movie goes. At the beginning of the movie, terrorists blow up a ferry. The main character, Doug, looks into who did it, how they did it, and how to stop them from doing it again. While investigating, he finds a woman who died in the explosion, but she appears to have died before the boat blew up, meaning she was killed separately. He also sees that her fingers were cut off on her right hand. I wonder why that happened. He then goes to her house to investigate. While there, he sees a message written on the fridge saying, "You can save her." He also sees blood on the floor and in the trash. After he finishes his investigation, he talks to his colleagues. They set him up with a special team with a new type of technology which allows you to look into the past by 4 days. Using this, they get to see even more clues. Like, they find out where the terrorist is hiding out. When they go there in present day, they see an ambulance driven into the wall. Well, I wonder why that was there. But enough looking around. They decide to try and stop the past event. So they sent a note into the past. However, it does not succeed, and they don't end up saving anyone. So they need to try something else. Eventually, they decide to send a person back in time. So Doug climbs in the machine and travels back. Now this is where the explanations start to show up. First, he knows that the woman he saw earlier dies soon, so he has to hurry to save her. So he steals an ambulance, drives to the terrorist hideout, and drives into the wall. Well, that explains it. Then he goes inside and sees that he was about to cut the woman's fingers off, but he stops him. Okay, well, that's the first problem fixed. She now has her fingers. Then he takes her back to her house to calm her down and clean up. While there, he writes a message on the fridge, then cleans the blood off with him and throws the napkins in the trash. At this point, you may realize a flaw. Out of the 4 scenarios I brought up, from the message to the fingers to the ambulance to the blood, 3 out of the 4 were explained why they happened due to time travel. Those 3 occurred due to the idea that there's one timeline that cannot be changed. Everything you go back and do had already happened. So since the ambulance is there in present day, and it only is there because he went back in time, that means he had always gone back in time. Again, it was destiny. Meaning him going back in time shouldn't theoretically stop the terrorist since he had already gone back in time. Because of like time travel shenanigans, it's complicated. He even points this out.
Never change a thing.
However, that last situation ruins the whole thing. He stops her fingers from being cut off. How did he do that? That should theoretically be impossible, but to explain why, I need to make a diagram. Imagine there's 2 timelines. One where he does not go back in time. There's no message, no ambulance, no blood, and of course, he doesn't save her fingers. This is what happens when he does nothing. Now, if he did go back in time, he could do all of this. However, the movie treats it like both these timelines are happening. He must have gone back in time to do these, but also not have gone back in time to not do this. This is ruined even more at the end of the movie, when, again, spoiler alert, he drives the car bomb off the boat, saving everybody. How did he solve the problem this time, but not the previous time he went back in time? Since he had already had to have gone back in time to solve these things, why wouldn't he have also solved this thing? And if it was because the first time he wasn't able to solve it, then why was he able to solve it the second time? It makes no sense. Now, again, I understand why this happens. Having, say, the ambulance explained later in the movie due to time travel is fun, and it makes the movie more interesting. However, if we stuck strong with that rule not being able to change the past, then Doug wouldn't be able to save everyone. It would be impossible. So I guess it's okay to break a few rules when you're getting a better, more satisfying ending. So with that, I do hope all of you enjoyed this video. What do you all think about time travel? Is it cool? Do you think it's possible? I personally don't, but I do find time travel movies interesting. If there's any other time travel movies you guys enjoy, then let me know in the comments. Oh, and I highly do recommend Deja Vu if you haven't seen it. If you haven't, why would you watch this? But with that, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later. Goodbye. Well, this is a good video. I really want to talk about time travel. I've been I've been bugging like every family member I can talk to about this, about how Deja Vu makes no sense. It's dumb. And they're pretty all sick of it. But I wanted to talk about it somewhere, so here it is. I really want to talk about it. It's still a good movie. Obviously, like I've said, these flaws don't make movies bad. In fact, as I said earlier, it makes them better. Bootstrap paradoxes make movies better. It's really good.